Hi, this is Dan Devlin for the Detective Dan Devlin Show, Honorable People, Honorable Nation. We're doing a series on solutions. Our last program was on immigration, and just to catch you up on that, in case you didn't see it, we discussed the aspect of the young people who were brought here to the United States by their parents. And now we're trying to determine what should their fate be. Some of them have been here for many years. And whose responsibility is it? Do we blame the young people because their parents decided to bring them here? Do we, legally, they shouldn't be in this country? But many of them had no control over that whatsoever. And so, do you deport them? Do you have them leave the country, go back to a country that perhaps they know little or nothing about? And this is one of those difficult issues because we want to be compassionate. And our last video dealt with that. Why did this happen in the first place? And you may recall that we talked about the politicians, the government officials who were then serving in office, who decided we're going to allow them to stay for at least a certain period of time. Prior to that, when they came into this country, there wasn't good enforcement of our immigration laws, and so therefore it was somewhat easy for them to come into the country and stay and bring their whole family as a result. Now, I think we touched on the aspect that if we had a household and we had 2 children of our own, and it's a 3-bedroom house, really 2 or 3 kids, children in that household with 2 adults, that's a reasonably full house. But we may have a cousin who loses his parents, and we might say, gee, he needs a place to stay, so let him stay with us. So now you have 3 children and 2 adults. And all of a sudden, grandma is not as well as she was, and so she needs additional care. So because we're compassionate people, we say, the adults say, Mom, you've got to come and stay with us because we can't be traveling to your house all that distance every time you need help because we might not be able to get there in time. So there's usually someone at our house, and so that would be better for you. And so grandma decides to come and stay at your house. Now you have 3 adults and you have 3 children, and the term full house probably applies. But what if all of a sudden somebody else says, well, I know these people from a foreign country, and they want to come to the United States, and I know that you don't have a lot of room, but we'd like you to take them anyway. In fact, in some cases, governments are forcing various jurisdictions to take immigrants that they might not otherwise take. But back to our household, now we feel as though maybe we belong to a religious group and we certainly want to be compassionate. So we say, okay, 1 more mouth to feed, that wouldn't be so bad. And then you say, okay, we'll do that. And just before you receive this individual, somebody says, well, this individual happens to have a brother and a sister. And I know you were only planning on one, but two more wouldn't be that bad. And now they play on your sympathy, and you're saying, okay, what the heck am I going to do? And you realize my children need certain things. And if I have to absorb the price of taking care of these other, not one additional, but 2 or 3 additional children, how does that impact my family? Do my children not get to go to the schools that they want to go to or that they should be going to? Do they do without other things? Whether it's going to the movies, whether it's going someplace with their friends, whether it's, buying a certain toy, whether it's participating in a certain sport. But because we're compassionate people, we say, well, God, they need someplace to stay. And so we say, okay. And we take them in. And because they're from a foreign country, they don't speak our language. And some of the children are older, so they're not inclined to learn a new language all that quickly. And so we have a language barrier. And then we find out that one of those children is a boy, and he's had problems obeying the law. He feels left out, he feels isolated because, after all, he's only one individual, and as he goes to school, he might be the only individual who can't speak English very clearly. And so he feels somewhat isolated. And now the problems that you used to focus on were your children, trying to keep them on the right track so they can grow up to be good and decent citizens, and grandma, who needs certain care. And we know that grandma's going to need additional care. But for the adults, it's our mom, and we have to meet our obligations. But because now we have to run to school, or we have to go to the police department and take care of issues with the people who have now come into our household, we have to worry about the discipline. For those reasons, we begin to see maybe this wasn't a great idea. In fact, and I'll do this from memory, I didn't take the time to look up the particular incident, but it occurred probably 20 years ago now. A small town, and I believe it was in Wisconsin, but I could be wrong on that. They felt as though they weren't doing their part in inviting people from other countries to come and live in their community. So a pastor of a church decided he was going to sponsor, and their church was going to sponsor a few couples. And what happened was, just because we don't have an endless time here, essentially the people came and they were happy. They tried to adjust. It was difficult, but everyone in the church tried to help them out. They provided them with money and things that they could do, opportunities to get work, and to assimilate, to become one of the community. But because the laws are the way they are in the United States, and because they too felt as though they're different than the people around them, it seemed a good idea to invite some of their relatives to come and be part of that community as well. And the people from the church and the pastor, they were patting themselves on the back. And the pastor, if you hear him tell this story, years after they undertook this venture, you could hear in his voice and see in his expressions what he really thought of this great idea at that particular time. What happened was, after a number of years, they had invited a substantial number of people, and those immigrants themselves were able to have people come even if the church didn't want them to come. So they would live with the families that were already there. It wasn't too long before the young men, the children of that group, insisted that the school teach them in their language. And then they formed their own community, and they started to intimidate the people who had lived in that community for many, many years. And pretty soon, the pastor and the people from the church said, "What the heck are we going to do?" What did we do? We had a thriving community. Our kids didn't have too many problems. They were dedicated to school. They had the ability to go to a decent college and get an education and help people all along the way. But instead, they made decisions to drastically alter their community without talking to people who have been through this before. Those things are happening in our nation. Our nation is changing, and people say, "Oh, well, that's good. Diversity is good." Well, some diversity is good, and some diversity is not very good at all. And we need to know the difference, and we need to know the people that we should be inviting to take part in our country. I mentioned this when we talk about the U.S. Constitution. The Constitution has a main purpose, as far as I'm concerned, and most people would probably agree. And it says, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." Now, if you've been paying attention, watching our program, you know my view on those words, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Your posterity is all your descendants until the end of time. What our founders did, wisely, is they said that they were setting up a country with certain rules, and they were doing it so they could secure the blessings of liberty. And many of the other things that we mentioned, like establishing justice, that's just one of the blessings of liberty. And not to secure those blessings of liberty just to themselves, but to their posterity. And the Constitution says our posterity. And so their vision, and they understood that the work that they were doing, the risks that they were taking, were for the purpose of making sure that their descendants, all their descendants until the end of time, could benefit from that. What do you think our founders would say when we're inviting so many people from other countries that we're changing the principles, the dynamics, sometimes actually the religious persuasion of our country? Our founders established this country so that their descendants, their grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and beyond, would be able to live in freedom, in peace, to be able to thrive, to have the right to make their own decisions about what they wanted to do with their life, to become economically viable as a country and as a family, to be able to afford the things that allowed us to be good and decent people without having to depend upon someone else. But there are people in our country who understand the value of having people who are dependent upon you. And certain government officials, certain political parties, not necessarily just one, perhaps dominantly one, understands that value of getting people who are dependent upon those politicians or that political party. Because that political party is not willing to teach them the skills they need to get along in our country, to be able to contribute. They really need those people to continue to be dependent because they will eventually vote for that party. Cynical? Sure. Reality? Absolutely. And so things are not as simple as we would like them to be. I've mentioned before, I was in Vietnam, and I would have liked to have brought some of those children back to the United States. But to do that, there were so many, you couldn't bring them all. And so not only was it unreasonable to do so, but you would be bringing them into a different culture. If they're young children, it's not as bad because they catch on quickly and they grow up in that environment. But if you're talking about 10, 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds, they're already established in their country. And so I think our policy overall should be help people where they are and determine what your nation should be and work towards those goals. Do not undermine what our founding fathers and the people who have worked so hard to give our children and our grandchildren the opportunity to be free and independent and choose the path that they want in life. When you have the pressure and government officials are demanding that you contribute more and more dollars to people who refuse, and this is not all people who come here as immigrants, but it's a significant number. They choose to simply live off the government, and we're a laughingstock in many places around the world and looked at as fools for allowing this to happen, and they know that we're destroying our own country. So where does this all go on the topic of immigration? My heart breaks for young people who are faced with this problem, but we have to understand why they have to face this problem. And part of that is their own parents, who knew that they were bringing those children into a country illegally. They knew it might cause them pain and suffering and heartache, and they may have to go back to their home country. In the last video, I almost suggested, in fact, I outright suggested that maybe there should be some way that they could stay. It doesn't seem too unreasonable to give them some sort of legal status and allow them to apply for citizenship, and when that comes through, then they can be an actual citizen of the United States. But if one thing is important in designing a society, it's something called fairness. And fairness is vital to having a stable society. Because when things are not fair, those who feel as though you're not fair to them oftentimes go outside the law in order to accomplish what they want to accomplish. Why? Because you weren't fair with them. Why should they be fair with you? we wind up creating more problems for our society, not fewer problems. And so, if we look at laws in general, and we did have immigration laws, and people did come here illegally, and we say to a group of people, all right, yeah, we had this law, but we're going to make an exception for you. Don't you think that others would say, well, maybe they'll make an exception for me. I don't have to obey the law. Understanding that it's important to obey the laws is a very good thing. And we have many people who have gone through that process of coming to the United States the way we have designed that. And essentially what we're telling them is, yeah, we know that you were doing it right, and these people didn't do it right, but, we're compassionate people, so we're going to help them out. How do you think you would feel if you were one of those people who had to now continue to wait in line, continue to spend a significant amount of money, when in reality, if it wasn't for the people coming here illegally, they may already have been approved and become a citizen of the United States? See, we want people who understand that we want them to obey the law. Not people who we teach violate the law, worry about whether you get in trouble later. And maybe we'll just have a compassionate judge or a compassionate jury or a compassionate people who says, okay, well, that really our law didn't matter. And the people who obeyed them are really fools for doing it. They would have been better off if they would have come here illegally. Do you think that that's the standard that we should have? I don't. Because I know that that leads to destruction. Working in organizations and seeing how they have rules. And all of a sudden, for a few people, they're going to break the rules. We have it happen in government. We lay down certain rules and we say, an official, let's say the governor, for example, has to go by certain rules. If he wants to pass a law, it has to go through the legislature, and before it can be passed, we have to allow a 3-day waiting period for the public to take a look at the law, be able to express their opinion as to what they believe about it, and then pass it if need be. But in New York State, we have a governor who understood that law, but at least in one instance said, we've really talked enough about this. We don't need that 3-day period, or whatever the period was. I'm just going to sign it and make it a law. And then when people objected, he gets the approval of one judge who says, oh, it was an emergency, he had to do it. But the reality is, if it was an emergency, it should have gone into effect immediately, shouldn't it? But that wasn't the case. So when we have a governor, when we have law enforcement officers, when we have members of the public who don't go by the law, and some people are punished and other people are not, you don't get an honorable society by doing that. So my conclusion on the immigration issue, particularly where it comes to young people who are already here, I think we have to admit our faults. And if we can, hold those people accountable who allowed those people to stay here once we knew they were here illegally. And I'm afraid in order to reinforce that rule of law, we have to say, unfortunately, you cannot be a citizen. And the only way to become a citizen is to go back to your country and get in line and do it the right way. Can we allow them to have a visa to stay for a while? That's another issue that might be possible, but there is no way that I believe that they should have citizenship in any other way than what was legal then and now. Wrestle with that. We're about solutions. Some of them are very difficult, but God bless you all. I hope you all have a great day and understand we're about looking at all aspects of the law and the condition of our society in order to solve the problems that we're facing honorably. They can be solved otherwise, but it takes you being involved. You can contact us at honorablepeople.honorablenation.org, or you can go to our website, FundamentalHumanRights.Org, and let us know that you're interested. Help us in the studio. And if you're not interested in doing that, find an organization that believes in the things that you believe in, that seeks the truth and wants to solve the problems that we have in American society. And you will not be one of those people who is just going along, uninvolved, and letting a society go wherever it will. Your job in American society is to guide this nation to where it should be. And I hope that you do it in the way that you look at a problem and you say, what is the right and just thing to do? It's all up to you. We can use your help, and the nation as a whole can use your help. God bless you all. I hope you have a great day. This is Dan Devlin for the Detective Dan Devlin Show, Honorable People, Honorable Nation.